Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's May 1st Friday webinar. We are very excited to have Carly Halverson from Gonzaga University joining us today. Her session is titled, "I'm sorry your insert important person here died and other things not to say to grieving students." Before I turn it over to Carly, I just have a couple of reminders for you. Please feel free to type any questions you have into the chat box so our presenter can either answer questions throughout or at the end of the session. Before you log off, don't forget to fill out the First Friday webinar evaluation, which can be accessed via the link I will be posting in the chat a bit later on. Also, we are always looking for new presenters for the First Friday webinar series. So please feel free to fill in that form and include that you would be interested in presenting at the bottom of the form, or reach out to myself or Becca, our other professional development committee chair, via email, which I will also be posting in the chat. Finally, don't forget to keep yourselves muted throughout the duration of the webinar. That way everyone can hear Carly clearly. Thank you all again for coming, and without further delay, I will turn it over to Carly.
Yeah, thank you. Hi everyone, welcome. I just wanted to kind of give you a couple just heads up here before we get started. First, I'm kind of living in somewhat of a construction zone right now, so if you hear some noises, they're just ripping up carpet and moving furniture and all that good stuff. I also live with a dog that sometimes can be a little loud, so I just want to preface that if you hear her or see her, I tried really hard to wear her out this morning, and so I'm hoping she'll just nap, but just wanted to make you all aware that she might make an appearance, and I apologize for that in advance. And finally, my last thing is that this time that we're in life right now, I recognize is a very heavy time for a lot of us. And this topic is not the easiest topic to digest. And so it might feel heavy, it might be heavy. And I just want to be upfront in that that's probably most likely going to be reality, but I feel like there's a lot of good stuff to learn. And I hope that you can walk away from this knowing those things. But I just want to own those emotions that might be here. So as was stated, my name is Carly. I'm a second year RD at Gonzaga University. And this was my presentation that I actually presented at NWACUHO, the conference in February. And I'm here again. So yeah, I guess I want to kind of start this whole thing off just by saying that this is my story. It might be different from others. Through my own experience with grief and talking with others who are going through or have experienced grief, I found that our experiences are very similar. That being said, if you have a different experience or you talk to someone who's had a different experience, that's okay. Everyone feels these emotions differently. Grief looks different for different people, and there is no right way to grieve. And again, just highlighting that this conversation might get emotional. I might get emotional, and that's okay. You might get emotional, and that's okay. This is a safe space to be, and while talking about grief is sometimes a taboo topic, this virtual room is a safe space to talk and feel and cry and do whatever you need to do. So own those emotions and know that it's okay to feel what you're feeling. I also want to highlight my sources. A little while ago, I found a website called refugeingrief.com. And the majority of my information is from that site. And Megan Devine is the author of that site. She also wrote this book called "It's Okay That You're Not Okay, Meeting Grief and Loss in a Culture That Doesn't Understand." If you're experiencing grief or working with someone who is, I encourage you to take a look around the website, take a look at the book. Megan provides excellent resources, stories, information, and support for both grievers and those that are walking alongside those in grief. So it's a great resource, and just want to highlight that that's where, besides my own experience and experience of others, that's where a lot of my information is coming from. So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump right in here. this again is my story. I grew up in Gresham, Oregon. I had a very happy childhood, and this is my dad, Skip, and my dad was a high school teacher and my mom was a nurse. But basically that meant that my dad and I had all the same breaks. So we spent a lot of time together, obviously, growing up. And he was kind of my best buddy, and I loved spending time with him. That close relationship continued to grow and continued on through high school and through graduation, when I moved very far away, an hour to go to college, and I had a terrible time. I am a super huge homebody, and I had literally never moved in my entire life, and I moved to Newburgh, Oregon. Sorry about that. I did get a question. I'm sorry, I got a little nervous and I forgot my pronouns are she, her, hers, and so I apologize for not sharing those earlier. And yeah, I'm really sorry. That was really weird. And so, we're going to move on. I appreciate you all and your encouragement to keep going. And I'm just going to try and kick back in. If there are any questions or you feel like I missed something, go ahead and shoot it in the chat, and I will keep an eye on that and keep rolling. So thank you all for your encouragement in this. But yeah, I'm gonna try and jump back in here. Yeah, so anyways, I believe I was at my college experience, and so yeah, I went away to college, and as I said, was having a tough time adjusting, which I think is a very common situation for our first year students. And I was only an hour away, and I had a terrible time. And so I started this habit of calling my dad every single day, just to mostly cry to him about my current predicament and to kind of see what was up with him. And we continued these conversations every day throughout my entire college career. And I feel like it really bonded us together closer. And we continued those all the way up until my college graduation, when I actually received a job offer to pursue a career in sports, which obviously panned out. And I moved to Oklahoma to work with a professional basketball team 10 days after graduation. So my dad and I packed up a U-Haul, and he drove me out there. And again, I had a really hard time adjusting, but with my dad's encouragement, I kept at it. And it was in about July. So I moved in May, and about July, my dad had made a comment to me that he was going to a doctor's appointment, and he was going on a Friday, and my mom was going with him. And that was very weird because my mom worked every Friday. And so that kind of set off an alarm bell in my mind. And it was just very, very strange. So I called him that Friday afternoon. His doctor's appointment ended, and he didn't answer my phone call, which again was very weird. He didn't call me back, kept trying to call him, couldn't get an answer. So I ended up getting a hold of my mom, and I remember I was in the grocery store talking to her on the phone, and she said, where are you? Call me when you get home. So I, pretty much left all my groceries in the store, called my mom as soon as I got to the car, and I said, hey, I'm here, what's going on? And she let me know that my dad had not been feeling well for quite some time, but he was a little bit of he always felt like something was wrong with him. And so he went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, I don't see anything, you're fine, you're healthy, whatever. And he eventually said, I don't feel well, run every test you have to run. I don't care what it costs. I want to figure out why I'm not feeling well. And after he said that, they did a few tests. They actually gave him a CT scan, and they found a node in his lungs, which was his first diagnosis of lung cancer, which was a shock to us because he had never smoked. So I talked to my dad and said I wanted to come home. He told me no. I needed to be in Oklahoma and continue to pursue this dream. And he was going to be fine. He was going to beat it. And then again, I got another call in August. This time my dad had been back to the doctor and they had actually determined that it wasn't lung cancer, it was actually pancreatic cancer. And along with that diagnosis, he was given 18 months to live. And at that point, I said, you know what, I'm coming home. So I finished out my basketball season. I sold pretty much everything I had, and I hopped in my car and I came back to Oregon, and I spent the next 6 months full-time caring for my dad. He passed away on March 6, 2014, so give or take sometime about 6 months after I had returned from Oklahoma and made the decision. And it was obviously a huge life-altering situation for me. As I said, everyone kind of feels things differently. For me, my grief, I feel I felt it the hardest actually before he had even passed away. I needed to be sad before I even lost him, because I was mourning not only, you know, this impending loss of my dad, but I was also mourning the loss of my dream of working in professional sports, my independence, my, you know, financially and personally, all my possessions that I had lost, in my move, my friends that I had left behind, everything. I was mourning so much all at once that I just wanted to be sad. And those around me had a very hard time in dealing with this shift of my personality, because I went from being bubbly and excited and happy to really melancholy and just sad. And I just wanted to feel that, and no one wanted me to feel that. So I heard comments by friends and family, you know, I'm so sorry, about 100 times a day. After he passed away, he's in a better place. Or, you know, my favorite was, you should really go see a counselor. And I was like, I don't want to see a counselor. I want to be sad. Let me be sad. And then, you know, they followed up with, well, why are you so sad? It was an incredibly lonely time, because I felt like I was the only person that was feeling the feelings that I had. And I remember the day after my dad had passed away, I had an oil change appointment for my car. And I remember going to get my oil changed, and it's, you know, I was essentially, after my dad had died, the best way I can describe it is if someone had opened me up and scooped out all of my bones and insides and everything, and I was just this empty shell walking around. I had nothing inside of me, and I was just kind of doing what I felt I had to do. So I'm, you know, at the Toyota dealership getting my oil changed, and I go up to the front desk to pay, and they're like, all right, well, this car is under this account for Kendall Halverson. And Kendall was my dad's legal name. And at that point, it was the day after he had passed, and I had to sit there and say, you know, I need you to change that name to Carly, because Kendall won't be here to change the oil anymore. And that was the first time where it was like, oh my gosh, yeah, he's not going to be here to do these things. And that was tough. That was just such a raw moment, obviously so much so that it stuck with me nearly 6 years later, of this, you know, this pain that I felt and this emptiness that I felt in the day after my dad had passed away. Oh, sorry, let me get on this screen again. So my reality in grief looked a lot like this. I had kind of stopped sleeping. I had stopped eating. I had a lack of interest in activities that I typically really loved and enjoyed. I lost a lot of hair, which was pretty scary for me. And then on top of that, I also had the physical appearance of stress. One of the things that stood out to me the most was I went to the dentist after this, you know, when I was going through the kind of the heart of all this grief, and my dental hygienist looks at me and was like, oh, are you going through a lot of stress? And I said, well, yes, I am actually. And she goes, yeah, I can tell your teeth are stressed. Like I can see the stress on your teeth, which I didn't know could happen, but it just is a testament to the effect that stress can have on the physical human body and the real toll it can take. This grief, this reality and grief looks different for everyone who's experiencing this pain. So some people get angry, and I did as well, but some people stay angry. Some people stay sad. Some people pretend that nothing's going on at all, and that's how they cope. After we as the spectators hear of these big life-altering changes in someone's life, we begin to fear this reality. Death is the only thing that we can't escape, and seeing someone lose their dad or their wife or their child or whomever, we look at that shattered person and think, wow, that could really easily be me. And then after that thought comes into our head, almost in the next minute, we think, but I'm not going to think like that. Because if I think like that, then I'm going to manifest this into the world. And we begin to push people to move outside of that sadness and that grief for our own sake, so that we feel more comfortable, because then we don't have to think about the reality of losing someone that we love desperately. And we ask them to move on from that sadness and grief before they've even really begun to feel it. And that's how we offer our own grief support. In Megan's book, It's Not Okay, or It's Okay That You're Not Okay, on page 31, she writes, but you can't force an order on pain. You can't make grief tidy or predictable. Grief is as individual as love. Every life, every path is unique. There is no pattern and no linear progression. Despite what many experts say, there are no stages of grief. So a lot of my issues with grief support kind of look like this. These are phrases that I heard a lot. I'm sorry that your dad died, but he wouldn't want you to be sad. Think of the good times you had together. At least you had him as long as you did. God takes this pain and makes it into light. He is no longer suffering and he's in a better place now. Everything happens for a reason. Remember the good times you had. I'm so sorry. Let me tell you about my loss and how it's so much worse than yours will ever be. We don't like to feel uncomfortable, and death and suffering is uncomfortable. So in our quest to make ourselves feel better by helping others that are grieving, we often truck over these real emotions by saying these phrases. We offer suggestions on how to get better faster, offer words of support, share our own story of grief or a story of someone we know to say, see, they made it, so can you. By trying to make the pain go away with words of comfort, we're glossing over the pain that demands to be felt. We are, in essence, telling those in grief that their pain doesn't matter and will solve this issue of grief. This is not providing support that people need. Grief comparison and shared grief, so the last line of, let me tell you about my loss and how much worse it is than yours, does not bring comfort. When someone is coming to you with their grief, the time to share your own stories of grief and tragedy, that's not the time. When someone needs to be heard and needs to tell what they're experiencing, you need to listen and not try and piggyback off those emotions to make yourself feel better in your own sadness. And the issue with a lot of these phrases is the unspoken second half of that sentence. So God takes this pain and makes it into light. So stop feeling how you feel. You know, everything happens for a reason. You needed to suffer this loss and pain to become a better person or to realize how truly fragile life can be. There's this unspoken second half that hits someone in grief with a knife because we know that it's there. So how long can someone be sad? When does grief go from I'm so sorry for your loss to this is getting annoying and dramatic and let's move on with life? Spoiler, there isn't really a grief time frame. The trauma of losing someone can be easily triggered by a number of things. Megan wrote in her book on page 29, I remember telling someone I was having a rough day about 5 weeks after my partner drowned. Why? What's going on? They asked. Matt died, I replied. Still? That's still bothering you? Still, yes. 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years. One of the best things someone said to me in the months after Matt died was that with a loss of this magnitude, just happened could mean 8 days ago as easily as it meant 80 years. When I speak to someone within the last 2 years of their loss, I always tell them, this just happened. It was just a minute ago. Of course it still hurts. Their relief is palpable. For me, one thing that I've noticed in my own grief journey, you know, I'm a little past the 6-year mark of losing my dad, and I feel that I carry it in a very functional way. I am able to, you know, watch movies with, you know, parental loss. I'm able to have these conversations. I'm able to give these presentations and not, you know, break down in sobs about it. But one thing that was interesting in my own personal life actually happened in January. I was having, you know, a fine time and wasn't really thinking about my dad or anything. And then the news hit of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gigi passing away in a helicopter crash. And that hit me so hard. And I feel like I need to share a little bit of background here in that I'm a huge NBA fan, and I have never liked Kobe Bryant, ever. And it almost feels like I shouldn't say that because of the tragedy that happened, but I have never been a Kobe Bryant fan. When he retired, I was like, finally, let's get this guy out of here and let's get things moving. And I read that news report and I broke down. And I had such real emotion because in reading that, I knew that a father had been lost and his kids were going to have to live my reality now. And they were going to, for the rest of their life, carry around this grief that their dad was no longer with them. And it was hard. That, you know, a few days after when the Lakers played their first home game, they ironically played the Trailblazers, who are my team, and I tuned in to watch the game, and they had a memorial for Kobe before, and I just wept. And my fiance was sitting there, and he was like, why? You've never liked Kobe Bryant. You have always talked mad trash about him. What is going on? And then he sat there and he realized, oh, this is about your dad, isn't it? And it was 100% about my dad. Well, I can grieve the loss of a sports icon. What I'm really grieving is the loss of a family man who has 3 other children that have to live this reality of not only do they have to live through the loss of their father, but also their sister or their daughter. And that's hard for me. And it completely triggered my feelings of grief. And for about 2 weeks, I just walked around with this cloud of grief over me. And I was kind of feeling like, all right, no one really understands the emotion this evokes in me, because I'm not mourning the loss, you know, because my favorite basketball player has passed away. I'm mourning the loss that these girls and his wife have to live through. And that was 6 years after my father had passed away. I was reliving my grief again through something totally unexpected. So there is no time frame for someone to get over their loss. Someone could be sad and emotional for 2 weeks over a loss, and then seem fine, while internally or behind closed doors, they're weeping and dealing with the pain for years. This little, I hope that you can read it on your computer screen, but the Care and Feeding of Your Grieving Person is a resource from refugeandgrief.com, which if you would like an emailed copy, I can send you one. But I love that it talks about tangible ways that we can care for people going through grief. And these apply to all times of grief and not just at the beginning. But I love the 2 at the bottom that say, let them be sad and be awkward, because I think those are the hardest things for people to grasp when they're walking alongside someone in grief. And so looking at this and hearing all of these, what do we do? Megan writes in her book, when you try and take someone's pain away from them, you don't make it better. You just tell them that it's not okay to talk about their pain. To truly feel comforted by someone, you need to feel heard in your pain. You need the reality of your loss reflected back to you, not diminished and not diluted. Megan goes on in her book to tell more stories She becomes a grief counselor, and she works with people and shares the stories who have had pain from grief that goes untouched, unheard, and uncared for. And those people, because of that pain, go on to hurt others because they've never felt heard or cared for in their own pain in the way that they needed. And so, since the death of my father, I've heard this phrase time and time again: welcome to the club, we've got tissues. And while it seems, it might sound a little messed up, no words to me have rung truer in this new stage of my life. In fact, my last semester of grad school, I took a counseling class, and the professor, she was talking about how when her mother passed away, she realized she all of a sudden had this lifetime membership to this terrible club where, people have lost parents. And I was sitting in class, I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Yes, I'm in that with you. And it's this terrible club that we're all a part of. And when you lose someone, when you lose a loved one, you get a lifetime membership, and it's not something you can fully understand until it happens to you. And there is a lot of comfort found in these groups of people who have already experienced this and can acknowledge that you're not alone in this situation. Acknowledgement is everything, and for many people, they cannot fathom the experience of losing someone, so they refuse to acknowledge it until they're experiencing it themselves. So my encouragement to all of us working in housing and in higher ed, and just all of us striving to be good human beings in this world, I encourage you to ask the questions of people that you know who are open in their grief and their loss, and ask them if they're okay with you sharing their name to students, to kind of create this camaraderie on campus, to know that there are other people experiencing this pain. These resources, these people who have gone through grief and going through grief, they might never be utilized by students. I offer myself to students all the time, and I rarely get, asked to have a conversation. Every once in a while we do talk, but it's very rare. But I think that there's comfort in knowing that someone is there who is older and has made it, somewhat made it out of it, and that they're available as a resource. And I think we should also work to ensure that RAs, campus resources, and housing staffs are aware of the situations of loss and are working to ensure that the student is in a place where they can continue their education. I was 23 when I lost my dad, and I can tell you, if I had been 19, I don't think I would have been able to finish school. I don't think I would have been strong enough. I had the time and the space to grieve, and I just don't know that I would have had that in college. And I think that that's a very real reality for a lot of our students, and that we need to be aware of those situations. This is another, on the screen is another flyer from refugeeandgrief.com. It's very simple and very easy of a do this, not that, and how to help a grieving friend or colleague or student or fill in the blank. This is another document that I have that I can send to you all if you want it. It's also on the website, but it again just talks through, these are things that you should not do, that your instincts are going to be like, this is what I should do because this makes me feel better, so it'll make them feel better. And then we have another column that says, no, this is what you should actually do to help support that person. My favorite thing about this is show up, listen, and don't fix. And above all, show your love. It's very simple, but it's often forgot in these situations, and I just wanted to highlight that. So finally, I have one more section from this book that I would like to read to you. It starts on page 36, and it says, pain is not always redeemed in the end or otherwise. Being brave, being a hero, is not about overcoming what hurts or turning it into a gift. Being brave is about waking to face each day when you would rather just stop waking up. Being brave is staying present to your own heart when that heart is shattered into a million different pieces and can never be made right. Being brave is standing at the edge of the abyss that just opened in someone's life and not turning away from it, not covering your discomfort with a think positive emoticon. Being brave is letting pain unfurl and take up all the space it needs. Being brave is telling that story. It's terrifying and it's beautiful. Those are the stories we need. Megan Devine also wrote this quote. It's from her book that's on the screen that says, "Some things cannot be fixed, they can only be carried." It parallels perfectly with a quote that I clung to in the early stages of my grief. That was, "Pray not for lighter burdens, but for stronger backs." I won't ever be able to fix losing my dad because I cannot physically bring him back. I will only carry this with me. And that's the reality of it. We're not trying to fix grief. We're trying to get it to a place where we can carry it with us. And so as we're looking at this and this picture of my friends, I'm sure you're asking, like, this is weird. What is this all about? These are a few things that I learned from my experience that I want to impart on you all and how we can better serve those who are going through grief. The first thing that I would say is to stop saying you're sorry. I understand that it's a knee-jerk reaction when we hear something sad to, "Oh, I'm sorry." I heard "I'm sorry" so many times that finally one of my friends from college said it, and I snapped, and I was like, "Oh, Marcus, you're sorry? Why? Did you kill my dad?" Which was not fair to put him in that situation, but it was, I had heard it 1,000 times and it didn't do anything. Didn't make me feel better. It didn't right the situation. It was just a thing that felt like a placeholder to me. And so while we can say it once, I think we should move on from it and stop reminding people that we're sorry. Another thing was asking the person in grief if they want to talk about the situation. And if they want to talk, actually listen. And if they don't want to talk, then be okay with that. I was asked a lot about circumstances around my father's death, but never about the actual event and how I felt. And that's what I wanted to verbally process, and I was never given the opportunity. So ask if they want to talk about it. Do normal things with people in grief. Everyone kind of, and it goes along with the other one of don't try and bubble wrap. Everyone wanted to very carefully pass me around and keep me happy and whole, and I wasn't. I was broken. I was sad. I didn't need to be protected anymore. I wanted someone to take me out to an ice cream, get an ice cream, or take me, on a walk, or do something that was normal. Instead, everyone wanted to sit in a dark room and talk in hushed tones and apologize to me. And that's not what I needed. I wanted ice cream. I wanted something that resembled real life. And that was very hard to find. But I actually found it with these people in this picture. These people, we got together and we had a wiffle ball tournament, and then we watched Elf in July. And, those are things where I still remember that because it was so needed in the time that I was in, and it was so rare to come by. I also have in here, be present, and especially be present without being asked. There was very few times when I asked someone to be there for me. I can remember, on one hand, the number of times I asked someone to be there for me. But I can remember every single time that people showed up when I didn't ask them. And those meant so much more to me. After my dad's service, I walked into our church's foyer where we were having the meet and greet after. I don't even know what you call it. And I turned around and two of my buddies from college were there. And one had driven 3 hours just to come to the service. And I will never forget that because that was what I needed. And I didn't ask them. They got the information through the obituary in the newspaper, and they just showed up. And that was huge. And finally, don't say things just to make yourself feel better. It's not your grief, so stop acting like it is. It's really weird when someone dies. It's all of a sudden all these people climb out of the woodwork and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that person was my best friend," and I am having they were my best friend ever. When in reality, the actual best friend was like, "Wait a minute, I'm confused. I don't get what's going on. And so while yes, we can feel these emotions, and I'm not downplaying those emotions, I also think we need to be real in the students that we're helping, in that this is their grief and we do not need to be taking that on. And we need to allow them to feel their grief. We need to hear that grief, and we need to be with them in that. And those are the biggest things that I could pinpoint after going through my own experience with grief. Finally, this is my email address. If you all would like those documents, or if you have, I don't know, any questions or anything that you don't want to ask here, you can shoot me an email, and I'm very responsive to it. But do we have any questions from anyone?
I have a question. Mm-hmm. I know you talked kind of briefly about like making yourself available to students, and that having like its own variable levels of success. Have you done this presentation with students? And if so, kind of how has that gone?
Yeah, I did a much condensed version. It was about 20 minutes with our RA class last year. And it was really well received, but I could also see on a lot of faces this like look of sheer horror that I was even talking about loss like this. And so I think that it affected the people the most that had gone through grief, because I had a lot of people coming up to me afterwards and saying things, even like to this year, saying, I remember when you spoke on this, and I actually had this question I wanted to ask you. So it stuck with them. But I think it was just for an 18-year-old who's never gone through it, I think it was a lot for them to learn. And so I think I need to play around a little more with how do I present this in a way that's more bite-sized, and how do I make it more tangible for them. But it definitely affected the people that I think maybe needed to hear it in that moment.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
I have a question. Hey everyone. I'm not part of NWACUHO, but I did go to University of the Pacific, and now I'm over at Cornell, so I saw this link. Thought I would pop by. It was a great presentation. Thank you so much. So I have a question around a specific situation. So I'm a residence hall director at Cornell. I have a student whose mother passed away from COVID-19 just recently. And I know this is a very unusual situation for all of us. And typically as a hall director, we would do a lot more casual ways of trying to interact with these students and help them know that they're supported, whether that would be dropping by their room, seeing them in a common space and asking how they're doing. And those are just things that we can't do right now. So I did reach out through email, did my best to not say these phrases that, but at the time the student was like, thank you, I don't really need any additional support from you. And so I don't want to push the student further, but do you have any advice or tips for how we could follow up if in a situation like this, if a student is I don't need support, but I don't know what their support network looks like right now. And I just want to make sure that they actually feel like they could go to me if they needed to.
Yeah. Do you know if the student was close with their RA at all?
So this student in particular was not, and their RA isn't here anymore. And the way it is at Cornell, we had some RAs who opted into serving from their homes, but this student's RA did not. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough situation. And I totally, I feel for you in this current situation and current climate. I would say probably one of the best things that you could do at this moment is to just offer those real life offerings of support. So, hey, can I drop a pizza off? Can I, figure out kind of what their favorite things are, maybe put something together for them. Because I honestly think that if they're saying
yeah, no thanks. It kind of sounds like maybe they're not super involved. Kind of just dropping by and continuing to offer support in like a, hey, I'm here for you, might not be very effective, but maybe going through the other way of, I'm going to support you as a human being. And so here are things that can help you through this, might be more helpful and maybe might make a bigger impact. The other situation, like the other fact of the matter is they might not need your support. And you kind of have to respect that. And so if, you know, you bring them, let's say you bring them a pizza and you talk to them a little bit and they're like, yeah, like I really don't need this, then at that point you've offered your support. They know where you are, they know how to get in contact with you, and you have to respect that they don't want you there right now. And that's okay. And it's hard to kind of sit with that, but that's just the reality sometimes.
Yeah.
Is that helpful at all?
That is helpful. Yeah, I like the idea of suggesting some practical things that I could do for the student. So I will definitely reach out and offer that. And if the student says, I'm good, I have the support networks I need, then yeah, I have to trust that they know what's best for them at this point.
Yeah. And I think, you know, in my situation, a lot of people kept trying to push me, like, go see a counselor, go see a therapist, go do all of these things. And I kept saying, I don't want to. And the more people pushed me to do that, the more I dug my heels in and I was like, I will never. And I know that that's not the right attitude to have, but that's where I was in that moment. And so I think we have to be very careful that we're not trying to push a student into doing something to the point where they turn around and they become self-destructive. So being aware of that reality as well. And just offering human support, I think, is going to be the best way to go about this right now.
Great. Thank you so much, Carly.
Of course. Any other questions from anyone? Okay. I want to thank you all for listening. I know that this is not a typical presentation because I don't have like statistical research of my own doing, but this is my real life that I'm talking about. And so I appreciate you all being open to listening. I again want to plug Refuge in Grief and Megan Devine's book. Amazing resources. I read you a few passages. She has very easy to digest reading or writing, and it's really good stuff. So I encourage you all to check it out. And please don't hesitate to reach out with questions or anything. And yeah, I just appreciate you all sticking with me through this webinar. I appreciate you all, and I hope that everyone's doing well in our current world. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carly, for your presentation. It was very personal, obviously, and I know that we all appreciate the learning that we took away. I want to apologize again to Carly, yourself, and to everyone else who stayed on. Our security breach was extremely unfortunate and inappropriate, and as Tiffany mentioned in the chat, we're going to kind of connect and figure out how we can prevent this in the future, because that was just very unfortunate. So thank you again, Carly, for sticking with us on that, and thank you all who either stuck around or came back for continuing with the presentation. We really appreciate that. I've posted the link to our feedback form on the chat there. So if people would like to provide us feedback or Carly feedback, please feel free to do that. And Carly, I'll forward that along to you once we get some more of that. As well, I'm going to be cutting the presentation down and just keeping the presentation part of it and posting that to the YouTube page, hopefully later on today, but maybe on Monday. So if you have colleagues who might have missed or exited the chat early, please feel free to let them know that will be there. Once again, if you have any questions for us or you are interested in presenting on your own topic, please feel free to send Becca and myself an email at the email I provided in the chat as well. But thank you all so much again for coming, and thank you again, Carly, for your excellent presentation. We just really appreciate it. And with that, I hope everyone has a great weekend.